it sure is nice to come home at the end of a long day and enjoy a podcast. But you know what makes the experience that much better? Relaxing with a few puffs of smoke from my McQueen pipe. At McQueenPipes.com, I was able to find the perfect smoking pipe to suit my nerdy, yet dignified sensibilities. I especially love that each pipe is designed and handcrafted by a true artisan, and that all of their pipes are inspired by fantasy books and movies like The Lord of the Rings. Being a bit of a hobbit myself, my pipe is called the Barrel Rider, but they've also got pipes for wizards, rangers, dragon riders, or even goblins. If pipe tobacco isn't your thing, no worries. McQueen Pipes has got you covered with attachments for vaping or even cannabis. Head on over to McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout to receive 15% off of your entire order. Go ahead, treat your nerdy heart to something you'll cherish and enjoy your podcast listening experience in style with a McQueen pipe. That's Mac like mac and cheese and Queen like the band. McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout for a 15% discount on your whole order. Cheers, everyone, and happy podcasting.
I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin ein Feeling.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable.
This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. This is, would you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to the Biographers.
I will say you should watch, if you haven't seen it yet, Steamboat.
Steamboat. No, I'll write it down.
Yeah, it's an anime movie. It came out in the 2000s. It's a steampunk movie. It's wicked cool, dude. Great animation.
I'm looking at the art right now. It looks sick.
Oh, the animation is so dope. The ideas in it are awesome.
It actually kind of has a Ghibli sort of vibe to it.
It does. I don't think it's Ghibli. I could be wrong, but I don't think it is.
No, I don't think it is.
But it is fantastic. One of my favorites ever.
Yeah.
It's really
well, you
good.
know, the reason why Ghibli is called Studio Ghibli is because it was the name on the side of an airplane, and Miyazaki loves airplanes. If you watch his movies, you'll see, like, in the background, like, ships, airplanes, battleships, like, any war machines are always drawn impeccably because that's where he, like, first found his love of art.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
That's
which is funny because his movies are so not, like, you know, action movies or really anything like that.
Sure.
But, oh, wow, yeah. This art looks amazing. I should totally watch this.
You should watch it as a group. And if Sharon hasn't seen it, he's going to like it. And it is one of those animes that, like, it has a very direct story, like a trackable story. It's not just this ethereal whatever. It's like,
yes,
there's this thing, and then this thing happens, and these guys are trying to get it, and then they've got to get it away because this guy made the thing. And, like, it's that kind of a story, and it's, man, it's groovy. Check it out.
Yeah.
You'll
that
like
is one thing about Ghibli films is a lot of them, they're not actually necessarily, there's no script written. What they do is they storyboard the art. So it's the story from the perspective of the artists first. And then that ends up getting sort of wrapped into a full and complete plot. So you might actually be noticing something when you're making that distinction there, which is that, yeah, it's, I think, Howl's Moving Castle was a book before it became a movie, but a lot of the other ones, they will just storyboard a plot, you know, with some rough sketches and some art, and then that ends up becoming a cohesive movie in the end.
Gotcha. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Biographers. I'm Daniel Newman, and with me here is Akiva Miola.
Hey, I can see you were trying to slow down right as you said Newman. You're like, I'm Daniel Newman.
That's exactly what happened, because I was like, I need to say this slower. I say it so fast every time, which made me forget my name, apparently. So that's fun.
You are Samurai. You have to, like, check your hands when you say your name.
Hey, of all celebrity comparisons, I will take Samurai Shiny Day. He's cool.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
He's cool with me. But we are just about to get going into Mark Twain Part 2. Hope y'all enjoyed Part 1. I know I did. But just before we get going here, a couple things to shout out like always. First and foremost, if anybody is enjoying the show out there and you want to give us some support, you can do so by going to our Patreon page, patreon.com/thebiographers. You can also give us a positive review on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate it. Anything else before we get going here?
No. We gave our shout outs to our new Patreon subscribers.
In the last episode, yep.
I think that's about it, man.
I think we're good to go. All right. Well, let's get going into Mark Twain Part 2 then. So last time, we saw the first 12 years of Samuel Clemens, a.k.a. Mark Twain's childhood. Sammy was the sixth of 7 children, though 3 of his siblings would die in childhood. He spent his first few years in a tiny town called Florida in Missouri, but when Sammy was 4, the family moved to the slightly bigger town of Hannibal, which he would come to consider his hometown. Hannibal would become a massive influence on young Sammy, and its location on the shores of the Mississippi River provided a constant flow of new faces and personalities brought to land on massive steamships. In Hannibal, Sammy would form a tight-knit group of friends, learn to read, and earn himself the reputation of a lovable troublemaker, but his family always struggled financially. But where we left off last time, Sammy's father, John Marshall Clemens, had just died in the spring of 1847, which caused Sammy to quit school, join the working world with hopes of soon becoming a printer's apprentice, and taking up the new name of Sam, a symbol of his transition into young adulthood. Now, after the passing of her husband, Jane Clemens seemed to go kind of nuts. She literally became a crazy cat lady, collecting strays whenever she saw them, with their home soon being infested with cats. She began smoking a pipe nonstop, and her once bright red hair started to fade to gray. The eldest of the Clemens children, Orion, took up the mantle of quote-unquote man of the house, which was actually a good thing, as he seemed to possess all of the good sense that his father never had. Just 1 month after his father died, Orion managed to negotiate with the landowner of their house on Hill Street, and the family was able to move back in. So his childhood home, they got back just 1 month after his dad died, thanks to the older brother, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, no, that's excellent.
Now, Sam was still in the process of finding an apprenticeship as a typesetter, so for the time being, Jane made him stay in school, but he took up odd jobs around town wherever he could. However, his nature as a lovable troublemaker proved to get the better of him, as he could never seem to hold down a job for long. He was fired from his job as a store clerk for dipping into the sugar supply. He was fired from his job at an apothecary because the tonics he concocted kept making people sick, and he quit his job at the bookstore because the customers never seemed to let him read in peace.
That's so funny.
He hopped around from job to job for about 1.5 years with nothing really sticking, until June of 1848, when he landed an apprenticeship at the local publishing house called The Courier. At The Courier, he did everything from sweeping floors to tending the fire in the winter, and was paid exactly $0.00 for his efforts.
Oh no. Why?
Because the payment was him learning to do this, according to the owner, right?
Of course.
Yeah, basically you're an intern. Now
I forgot they have a habit of actually making people work for no money down there. So.
Oh yeah. Now the only thing he got in return was a meal, some hand-me-down clothes from the shop owner, and the generally nasty company of his boss. The real payment he received was in learning how to set type for a printing press. Now, for everyone that is unaware, the printing press was invented in the year 1440 by Johannes Gutenberg, whose historic first mass publication is now referred to as the Gutenberg Bible, and was the de facto standard for publishing all the way up until the late 20th century. The printing press evolved over the centuries, becoming more efficient and able to print different pages in more rapid succession, but one thing never changed: setting the type. Now, typesetting was tedious, meticulous work, as the typesetter would be handed an original document and would then have to place every individual letter and number into a metal frame called a stick, before it would be added to the printing press to make books or newspapers. And they would have to do all of this backwards. All the letters were a mirror image, as when they would get covered in ink, and then pressed onto paper, it would be in reverse. So as a kid, Sam Clemens had to learn the English language literally backward and forward.
True.
Kind of cool. Now, for the next 3 years, Sam worked setting type for the Courier, soaking in all the stories from the surrounding area, everything from traveling preachers hosting revivals to stories of murder and death. But in 1850, the owner of the Hannibal Journal, a different newspaper, decided to seek out a fortune out west, as many others did, after hearing tales of gold littering the streams of California rivers. The California Gold Rush left the Hannibal Journal without an owner. So at the behest of Jane Clemens, Sam's older brother Orion decided to buy the paper and hire his 2 younger brothers, Sam and Henry, to set type.
Oh, cool.
Pretty cool. Now, Sam was now 15 years old and was quickly becoming known for his fast wit, his small stature, his ever-pluming cigars, yes, at 15 years old.
Oh, my God.
And thick, curly locks of wild red hair. When he wasn't setting type, he took every chance he could find to write comical roastings of locals around Hannibal to go in the Hannibal Journal, or sending off short stories to humorist papers on the East Coast, like the Boston Carpetbag or the American Courier, which was based out of Philadelphia. In one example, he added in a small blurb to the Hannibal Journal with an all-caps headline that read, quote, "Terrible accident, 500 men killed and missing," with a single sentence beneath it reading, quote, "We had set the above head up, expecting, of course, to use it, but as the accident hasn't happened yet, we'll say, to be continued."
So dumb. It's so funny. It just I can totally see like a 15-year-old kid just like, messing around with the stamps and just like coming up with whatever.
Literally. And it was his job to set the type, so it was like a lot of times he would do these little jokes like this, and his older brother didn't even know until it was all fully printed and out.
That's so funny.
So like that specific example, he literally did because he was like, it's funny. People are going to see the headline of like, oh my gosh, there was 500 men were killed and are missing. And then underneath that little sentence being like, yeah, we thought this was going to happen, but it didn't. So it's just like stupid, Now, Sam was also able to soak up tons of information from around the country, as at the time, every newspaper publisher was entitled to a free newspaper from any other publisher in the country if they sent a copy of their own. This came about from something called the Postal Act of 1792 and meant that Sam Clemens was reading headlines from San Francisco all the way to New York and Boston. Though Orion promised to pay Sam for his efforts, he never once did. So once again, he was working for free for his brother.
Just this time for his brother. That's funny.
So things went on like this for several years. The 3 Clemens boys, Orion, Sam, and Henry, all worked together at the Hannibal Journal, and with their financially reckless father out of the way, the family actually started to find stability. Even the town of Hannibal was expanding beyond its wildest dreams due to the rise in steamboat and railroad transportation. By 1846, it was the 3rd largest city in the state, and by 1860, it was the 2nd largest, second only to St. Louis. But it was now 1853. Sam was 17 years old, and his lust for adventure was growing stronger by the day. He had spent the past 5.5 years setting type for newspapers, and he had never really left Hannibal, apart from a few weeks every summer where he and his family went back to the town of his birth, Florida, to visit his uncle and his still enslaved childhood friends. He had begun to outgrow his hometown, so in June, he decided to leave everything behind, jump on a steamboat, and head for St. Louis.
Oh, wow.
The only person he told was his mother, Jane.
Oh, my God.
Literally. Who, before she allowed him to leave, made him place his hand on a Bible and vow, quote, "I do solemnly swear I will not throw a card or drink a drop of liquor while I am gone." She knew what was up. It would mark the start of Sam Clemens' near endless travels that would eventually take him around the entire world. He would only return to his hometown 6 more times by the end of his life.
Oh, really? Yeah. So this is like it. He's setting out.
He's like,
I'm imagining I'm totally imagining like a Huckleberry Finn, like barefoot with a bindle on my pack, like sort of.
Yeah, I mean, by this point, he didn't have a ton of money, so he wasn't like, in studs or anything like that. He was just like, in normal clothes, let's just go. I want to get into St. Louis and see what's up, right?
That's so funny.
Now, in St. Louis, he picked up a job setting type to make a few bucks, but he didn't stay long. By August, he was in New York, soaking up the cornucopia of cultures in the city, quickly becoming something of a Broadway show junkie and finding a job as a typesetter there.
So he's in New York now. Like, wow.
Yep. Like, he's just going. But strangely, it seemed that as he had grown into his late teen years, the racism and prejudices of the South took root in his mind. He would note during his time in New York that he disdained the, quote, Negroes, though he doesn't use that term, mulattoes, quadroons, and Chinese.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's like just in his journal, he says privately, okay? Now,
wow.
While this is obviously misguided and gross, one thing I love about the story of Mark Twain's life, as we've kind of said in the last episode, is that he perfectly embodies the idea that you do not have to remain the product of your upbringing, and that with exposure, people can change, even radically so. And we'll see many examples of this throughout his life. But I wanted to not ignore this, right? One thing that I did find with it's so weird to criticize Ken Burns because it just feels wrong. But one thing that I did not appreciate about the Ken Burns documentary series is that they basically skip over all of his racism until it gets to Huckleberry Finn, and they're like, and then look what he did. He's so great. And the more that I've read about Mark Twain, the more I'm like, no, this is a story of transition.
This was a long time coming, yeah.
Right. Like, you were not, like, from day one being like, I just don't understand slavery and racism. No. Like, he was, as a young person... Yeah.
It takes a
racist.
Unique level of self-awareness to question the status quo. I mean, over and over again, we see, dictators taking over countries, and then people going further in history being like, oh, if I was there in Nazi Germany, I would have not voted for Hitler, or I wouldn't have done this, or I wouldn't have done that. And just like, I think you are overestimating your wherewithal.
Right.
I think you are overestimating how self-aware you are.
Correct.
Just
now,
full stop.
Now, I will say, I think if we're looking at the scale of like racist to savage racist, I think he was pretty low down on that scale, right? I think it was sort of common racism for the time, if we can call it that, right?
Yeah.
But again, I didn't want to skip over any of this and like ignore it. I did want to make sure that along the way we're being like, do you see the change? It's bit by bit, crack by crack, but it's happening. He's realizing it. So I wanted to make sure that I'm showing that over the course of this whole series that we're doing here. So
yeah, it's interesting too. It's also like first exposure, because New York is easily the most diverse place in America at this point.
Yeah.
I could say pretty confidently, maybe San Francisco, but probably New York.
No, New York is because, you had people coming in from all over the place in New York. I mean, it was the hub of America, So I would say that's a pretty easy thing to say, is that it was very, very diverse in New York and had a ton of people.
So there's going to be huge culture shock.
Absolutely. Now, he would only stay in New York for 2 months before once again moving on, this time to Philadelphia. By February of 1854, he was in Washington, D.C. No matter where he went, however, he would constantly write letters to his family, and like a swordsman sharpening his blade for battle, Sam was taking note of everything he saw and experienced, honing his skills with words. Eventually, he made his way back west again, staying for a time in St. Louis, and in his first year after leaving Hannibal, he had traveled more than 2,000 miles. But this was 1854, and as the country edged closer to a civil war, tensions were on the rise. In August, riots erupted throughout St. Louis, and a militia was formed to try and stop the destruction. Sam just so happened to be staying with a friend who insisted the two join up with the militia. He was given a musket, and his outfit began to perform drills before being ordered to head into the streets. But as the group began to march forward, Sam started to realize what he was about to do and began having second thoughts. He would later write, quote, "I was behind my friend, and finally I asked him to hold my musket while I dropped out and got a drink. Then I branched off and went home." He just bounced. He was like, nah.
And remind me, what were the riots about specifically?
It was, so in the increasing pre-Civil War era, there was legislation that people were talking about passing that was like, hey, we want to either continue the cause of slavery or withdraw the cause of slavery. And people had thoughts on that. So they started to fight about it, basically. So it was political riots, basically, that were breaking out. Now, Sam liked the idea of battles, but he just wasn't a fighter. The thought of dying made him rethink his life, and he realized he kind of hated setting type and began reviving his boyhood dreams of becoming a steamboat pilot. So after about a year in St. Louis, Sam accepted a job offer from his brother Orion, who, along with the rest of the Clemens family, had relocated to Iowa. Once again, the three Clemens brothers were working together, but within a month, Sam was hopping onto steamboats whenever he could, trying to get his foot in the door as a steamboat pilot apprentice. It was on these excursions in the summer of 1855 that Sam would begin the lifelong habit of keeping a notebook. It was in these notebooks that he would pour out his entire mind. Random thoughts, keen observations, bursts of rage, insightful musings, funny anecdotes, and philosophical meditations, which would all come to form the building blocks of his distinct and influential style of writing, as well as providing source material for future books and essays. Throughout this time of working for his older brother, the issue of absent paychecks persisted, and on several occasions, Sam quit because he just wasn't getting paid. Though it's often been noted that Orion was an extremely kind person who really didn't mean to offend, Sam would forever skewer his brother in writings any chance he got, but seemingly in a kind of tough love way. But his younger brother Henry would grow to become one of his closest friends. The old adage of family is hard was even true for Mark Twain. In January of 1856, the 20-year-old Sam Clemens would get his very first taste of what we would now consider stand-up comedy. It happened during a banquet held amongst local publishers to celebrate the 150-year birthday of Benjamin Franklin, whom many consider to be the founder of typesetting. Now, in those days, it was commonplace during banquets for men to sporadically take turns delivering remarks to the crowd, which would often take hours. Because each dude had to stand up and say their own 10 or 15 minutes. Right. Yeah. Oh, gentlemen, you're all so lovely to be here, and it's great to know, like all that kind of crap, right? Mm-hmm. Now, towards the end of the night, seemingly out of nowhere, the crowd began to call for Sam to approach the dais and make some remarks, which took Sam completely off guard. He hadn't prepared a thing. Over the years, Sam had earned himself quite the reputation for storytelling, aided massively by his way of talking, which his mother called Sammy's long talk. So he kind of had this drawl about how he would talk to everybody in this sort of southern kind of accent. Like, yeah. Now, what he actually said has been lost to history. But for at least 15 minutes, Sam had the entire crowd in stitches, eating out of the palm of his hand. In that moment, he discovered that his gift for gab wasn't just in small conversations. He had the ability to entrance an entire crowd of people, crack them up, and leave them wanting more. So he just had that gift. He had that way where he could bring somebody in, you know. Now, another curious part of Sam's nature also began to emerge around this time. His insatiable lust for get-rich-quick schemes.
Interesting.
This is a good one. His first idea blossomed after reading about a miracle plant in the Amazon, the smallest amount of which was said to thoroughly nourish the locals' bodies and minds. So he started planning a trip to Brazil to explore the Amazonian jungle, find the plant in question, and begin distributing it around the U.S. The plant in question, of course, was cocaine.
Ah, there it is. I was guessing that was what it was.
So yes, a young Mark Twain almost decided to become the first cocaine kingpin of the United States. But it was never meant to be. He took a trip to St. Louis, then to Cincinnati, and eventually made his way down to New Orleans. He planned to book passage from there down to South America, but on his trip down, he managed to befriend a man named Horace Bigsby. Or should I say, pilot Horace Bigsby. Over the course of the journey from Ohio to New Orleans, Sam managed to befriend Bigsby and slowly but surely wear him down and accept Sam as an apprentice steamboat pilot.
Why do they call them steamboat pilots and not captains?
Because there are captains on the ship and then there are pilots.
Oh, is that a separate,
two separate things?
Huh.
So it's the steamboat pilot is the one who's literally responsible for steering the ship through the Mississippi River, right? But the captain is actually in charge of the entire boat. So the captain will say, hey, we're making port over here. Make sure that this is happening there, like coordinating a lot more. So it was two separate things.
Oh, good to know.
One was a pilot, one was the captain. So for the next 2 years, Sam would apprentice under the guidance of Horace Bigsby, learning the surprisingly difficult art of safely navigating the mighty Mississippi River. It was no easy task. A steamboat pilot was more or less required to memorize some 1,200 miles of snaking river, which was riddled with countless dangers hidden beneath the water's surface. It was seriously dangerous work. It's estimated that between 1811 and 1851, more than 1,000 steamboats either sank or exploded on the Mississippi River. And the average time a steamboat would remain operational? Just 5 years.
Oh, geez.
Yes. Now, by the end of Sam's career as a steamboat pilot, 10 out of the 15 boats he piloted would sink, though he was never on them when it happened.
Oh, there we go.
Just dodged
at least
the bullet.
He's lucky.
Yeah, literally 10 out of 15.
That's insane.
Now, navigating the river required a deep knowledge of not only how the river flowed, but how the engine worked and how to avoid colliding with other steamboats. But eventually, Sam would learn to read the river like a novel and would write, quote, "The face of the water in time became a wonderful book, a book that was a dead language to the uneducated passenger, but which told its mind to me without reserve, delivering its most cherished secrets as clearly as if it uttered them with a voice. And it was not a book to be read once and thrown aside, for it had a new story to tell every day."
Wow.
Pretty
what
cool.
A magical way to describe that.
Isn't that cool? I can give me goosebumps. I love that he says it's a book not to be read once and thrown aside. It has a new story to tell every day. Oh, it's so cool.
I like that.
Now, from 1857 to 1861, Sam Clemens would pilot steamboats up and down the Mississippi, logging in at least 120 full trips. Rather poetically, it was during these voyages that Sam would discover the identity of his alter ego. See, as steamboats made their way up and down the river, it was important for pilots to know the depth of the water to avoid running aground. So, the pilot, at their discretion, either rang a bell or tooted a whistle, which would call for a depth measurement. A measurement would then be taken by a leadman, named so for the length of rope they would use that had a lead weight attached to the end. So they would drop into the water and they would know like how deep it was. Mm-hmm. The rope would be dropped into the water and the leadman would measure the depth by a series of knots that were tied into the rope. As the rope descended into the water, the leadman would call depths out to the pilot, shouting, quote, "Mark 1, 6 feet. Quarter 1, 7.5 feet. Half 1, 9 feet. Quarter less Twain, 10.5 feet. Mark Twain, 12 feet, or 2 fathoms." Mark Twain was the minimum depth for a pilot to consider the water safe. Anything lower was deemed unsafe. So in other words, Mark Twain was the tipping point between safety and danger, just like Sam and his future writings.
Dude.
How awesome is that?
That is cool. Whoa. Mind blown. Whoa. That totally like, what?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. It is literally...
It's like having your name be Razor's Edge.
That is basically what he's kind of talking about, is that like it is safe water, but it's on the edge of it. It's that middle point of like anything not up to this is not safe. And that, if you think about Mark Twain's collective writing and what he was doing and what he was trying to accomplish over his career, and we'll see a lot of examples of this not only from his novels but from his actual newspaper writing, which he did for a really long time. That was always his way. Was
this a well-recognized phrase at the time, or was it just like more of like a code that he and maybe other boat captains understood?
It was a deep cut. It was like, but there was, he recognized it, eventually when they would call out Mark Twain, that he was like, that sounds like a name. And it's a good name too. It's Zippy Mark Twain. Like there's something about it that sounds...
That's cool, man.
Mystical, right?
I've always wanted a nickname. Damn it.
And so that's where
a good one.
It came from, is him being a riverboat captain, or pilot, I should say more accurately, and calling for these depth measurements and hearing these people in this slang way call back the depth measurements on the Mississippi River on these steamboats, that he got the name Mark Twain.
So cool, bro.
So cool. Now, through his many excursions up and down the Mississippi, Sam was able to read more than he ever had before, along with soaking up the sights, sounds, faces, and personalities of every city they made port. And possibly for the first time, he was able to discover his own personal philosophies and morals. In most of the towns where he stopped, things weren't exactly glamorous, especially at the dock. He began to take note of the harsh contrast of his environment. The passengers on the boat with their pristine, fashionable outfits and airs of respectability happily stepping onto shore, passing by slaves in tattered clothing, shackled together in chains, staring solemnly at their feet as they were loaded onto the steamboats like cargo. It seemed that here, the first small crack in his adult mind began to form. As a child, he hadn't really thought much about slavery or racism, but as he had grown into a young adult, he had seemingly adopted the thoughts and attitudes of those around him. But like someone seeing a painting and noticing the striking contrast of colors, Sam seemed to be noticing the contrast of society, and it wasn't one that he particularly liked. It was also during this time that Sam Clemens would begin to question the foundations of his faithful upbringing, largely spurred on after reading Thomas Paine's Common Sense, which rejected theology almost outright. Like a kid on a road trip before the invention of the iPad, Sam's long days as a steamboat pilot gave him an almost unending supply of what you might call thinking time. The serene and hypnotic stretches of the Mississippi became a form of deep meditation, and he was beginning to question the foundations of the society he lived in and the faith he was raised to observe, even the very nature of his own being.
It kind of reminds me of Brandon Sanderson talking about his experience starting as a writer, and his recommendation was always do something that is body work, not mind work, so that you actually have time to think. Like some of his first books that he ever published, like Elantris and stuff like that, he was working as a hotel clerk.
Interesting.
For like midnight shifts, right? So like literally no one shows up. He's just sitting at the counter, having time to think. It seems like that's a common thread for a lot of writers.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if this was your experience, but like I grew up in the age before iPads. So like I remember when we would go on road trips, it was like you pretty much just had to stare out the window and get lost in your own thoughts, you know?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It was good thinking time, you know?
Yeah, my mom never let us play games or you know, watch movies or anything in the car, anything of that sort. We were to look outside and just think. And I feel like that's a maybe I sound like an old man here, but I feel like that's a skill that is kind of dying out is just being bored.
No, I agree. It's good for your brain. It's good for your imagination. You can work a lot of stuff out when you're just sitting there thinking, you know? Mm-hmm. Now, his childhood beliefs in the Almighty and destiny in general were further called into question by events that took place in 1858. In February of that year, Sam managed to secure a low-level position on his steamboat, the Pennsylvania, for his younger brother, Henry, who is now one of his closest friends. The two would take 6 trips together before being forced to part ways in May of 1858. But before they could depart on separate ships, Sam would have a dream. He would later describe his dream by saying, quote, "I had seen Henry, a corpse. He lay in a metallic burial case. He was dressed in a suit of my clothing, and on his breast lay a great bouquet of flowers, mainly white roses, with a red rose in the center. The casket stood upon a couple of chairs." Always having a hunch that he possessed some kind of connection to the supernatural, Sam believed this to be a premonition and was overcome with grief. But he soon shook it off as just a dream and once again boarded the Pennsylvania. The pilot of the Pennsylvania, William Brown, was an asshole and a bit of a hothead too. On May 30th, the captain of the Pennsylvania called for an unexpected stop, and Henry ran up to the pilot house to relay the order to Brown, the pilot. Sam was there. He acknowledged the order, but Brown did nothing, and the boat floated past the dock. The captain rushed up to the pilot house and said, quote, "Didn't Henry tell you to land here?" Before turning to Sam and saying, quote, "Didn't you hear him?" Sam confirmed that he did. For about an hour, Brown stood at the helm, seething as Henry stood by, before finally turning to Sam and saying, quote, "Why didn't you tell me we'd got to land at that plantation?" Sam said, "I did tell you, Mr. Brown." Brown shouted, "It's a lie!" To which Sam shouted back, quote, "You lie yourself. He did tell you." Angrily, Brown ordered Henry to leave, but before Henry could move, Brown began to physically attack him. To this, Sam picked up a nearby wood stool, smashed it across Brown's back, then beat the shit out of him, punching him across the face for several minutes. Okay? So just to paint you the picture, right? Captain says, "We want to dock over here."
Yeah.
Henry runs up and says, "Hey guys, we want to land over here." Sam goes, "Got it." But the pilot ignores it. Once they drift past the dock, they end up getting into a fight where where Brown is going like, "Hey, you should have told me." And Sam's like, "He did tell you. I was here. He told you that." Right?
Yeah.
And basically Brown just was an asshole and didn't want to acknowledge that he was wrong or wasn't paying attention or whatever. Yeah. So they end up getting into a fight, right? Now, in the chaos, nobody seemed to notice that the steering wheel was left unattended and the boat was drifting out of control. But eventually,
if you're here, who's driving the car?
Right. But eventually, Sam let Brown up, who took the wheel once again. Thankfully, nothing happened. Sam was fully expecting to be arrested and jailed once they reached their destination in New Orleans, but the captain seemed to recognize that Brown was a douchebag, and rather than pressing charges, he was merely going to reassign Sam to another boat. So on June 9th, Sam watched the Pennsylvania push off with Henry on board, and the two waved goodbye. Now, 2 days after Sam began his journey upriver aboard his new ship, called the Lacey, the boat passed a small dock, and he heard someone shout, quote, "The Pennsylvania is blown up at Ship Island. 150 lives lost." Sam went pale. In the early morning of June 13th, 1858, just 60 miles south of Memphis, the Pennsylvania's boilers had overheated and exploded. It was one of the worst explosions in the history of steamboat travel. Sam got hold of a paper listing out the casualties from the tragedy, and thankfully, Henry was not listed. But a day later, another paper had Henry's name listed in a group labeled "Hurt Beyond Help." The Lacey made its way north towards Memphis and was forced to paddle through the watery graveyard of the Pennsylvania as bits of wood from the boat, along with floating corpses and other bits of human viscera, drifted past.
Oh my God.
Most of those lucky enough to have survived the ordeal were literally blown out of the boat, flung hundreds of feet into the air. Most were covered in massive burns, saw their own bones or intestines on the outside of their bodies, and were forced to float helplessly for hours amongst the bodies of their friends and family before being rescued. One particularly unlucky passenger, a priest from Milwaukee, was so close to the boiler that when it exploded, he was literally boiled alive. For better or worse, Mark Twain would later draw upon this horrific experience as the inspiration for the steamboat disaster that took place in his novel, The Gilded Age. Little spoiler. As for Henry, when the explosion took place, he was asleep directly above the boilers and was propelled into the air by a literal jet stream of superheated steam before crash landing back onto the boat. So he literally
just like directly up and then
up
back
and
down.
then literally right back down. Like brutal, right? But he did live and managed to crawl into the water before being pulled into a lifeboat. There he sat for over 8 hours awaiting rescuers as his skin literally peeled from his body.
Oh, this is gruesome.
Before finally being taken to Memphis for care. When Sam arrived at the hospital and saw the state of his brother, he fell to the floor and wept. Henry Clemens would die a few days later on June 21st, 1858, at the age of 19. Sam would write, quote, "My poor Henry, my darling, my pride, my glory, my all, has finished his blameless career, and the light of my life has gone out in utter darkness." Whew. More emotional.
It's so intense. I have a question, though.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure whether or not he ever reconciles this. As somebody who famously becomes atheist when he gets older, or at least agnostic, how does he reconcile with what he was told as a kid were premonitions? Like, does he ever address that in any way? Does he think that it was just like psychological, or nothing popped up in your research?
Nothing has really popped up so far. I think it was always just one of those things where he, that was really one of the only times that he himself experienced what he would kind of call a premonition, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a part of it was just due to fear because he loved his brother Henry so much. They were bestest of friends, and steamboat disasters were like relatively common.
Very common.
Yeah, I mean. So I don't know that there was ever any reconciliation so much as I think like a lot of people in that age too, there was fascination with supernatural, but it didn't necessarily...
just leaving it up as one of life's great mysteries or something.
Right. But I don't think it actually, in this case, kind of ends up having the opposite effect when it comes to religion, where he was like, if there is a loving God, why would he do this to the best of everybody that I know? I mean, he saw Henry as just like this angel of a human, basically, who did nothing, was sweet, kind, caring, hardworking, like did nothing to anybody, and this horrible death befell him.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, the burns, the landing directly back on, not even into the water, and even if you did land into the water, the infection, that must have been. I can't really think of a much worse way to go.
Oh man, at that time that's about as bad as it gets. You know what I mean? Especially when you think of like when you talk to firefighters are like, look, getting burned in a fire sucks. Getting burned by steam wrecks you.
Yeah.
You actually know that too, where people say like in knife making, right? Don't wear gloves when you're doing certain things because sweat can get into it. And then if you accidentally touch something, that it'll turn to steam almost instantly, and that will cause a deeper burn into your hand, right?
Yeah, I tell my students when they first start, I grind with gloves now because I keep my gloves dry. But if your gloves get wet and then you're working on, a grind that heats really quickly, then you're going to sous vide your fingers, I've told this before. The worst burns that I've ever gotten were in kitchens, not in forges, because that moisture and that lower temperature actually makes it so much worse than touching something that's 2,000 degrees.
Yeah, totally. Now, once this was all, done, once his brother had passed, Sam accompanied his brother's body all the way back to Hannibal, Missouri, where he was buried next to his father. The same cemetery that Mark Twain would later use to describe a grave robbery in The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. From the death of his brother, two major ideas would form in Sam's mind. Number one, it was he that led his younger brother to his untimely death. And two, God does not exist. So there you go. He gets to that point pretty much at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very reasonable response after seeing what he saw. And, like, it's really unfortunate that he had those guilt issues, that he just thought that he was the center of so much devastation in his own life. And that probably translates later on in his work, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, at this point now, he has two siblings that he blames himself for their death.
Yeah.
Pretty heavy.
Which, I mean, both of those were completely out of his control. Like, not even accidentally in his control.
100%, but he took on that burden. You know what I mean? He just was like, it was my fault, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Now, through his melancholy, Sam continued to find solace in the meditative waters of the Mississippi. About a year after Henry's death, Sam finally obtained his official steamboat pilot's license. This meant he was second on the ship only to the captain, and his salary was now $250 a month, which is equal to about $9,500 a month in today's currency.
Whoa. So he's like one of the most wealthy people, and
he doing good. He doing real good. And he would love to brag that he now made as much money as the Vice President of the United States. Huh. That was how well steamboat pilots were paid back in the day.
Wow.
Pretty crazy.
I mean, I guess it makes sense considering the danger.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Sam soon found himself enjoying expensive dinners, buying fancy clothes, and staying at the finest of hotels. Things were going pretty well for him personally, but the nation at large was edging closer to an impasse. In May of 1860, a fellow by the name of Abraham Lincoln had been nominated as a Republican presidential candidate by constituents in Illinois, and Sam's older brother Orion decided to join the campaign and amazingly became one of its key members.
Interesting. So his brother was also an abolitionist?
Yes.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. His brother really, joined up the ideals and causes of Abraham Lincoln. Was very much behind him. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Now, coincidentally, over in St. Louis, Sam's sister Pamelia was living happily with her insanely successful husband William, and the two would often entertain a restless drunkard who worked next door named Ulysses S. Grant.
Oh, no.
There's nothing to that. That's just a funny footnote. Before Ulysses S. Grant was anything, he was literally working next door to Mark Twain's sister, and he would come over and hang out all the time.
That's so funny. Huh. Oh, also, as an aside, I couldn't pull it up at the time, but when you were mentioning that Twain was reading Thomas Paine's Rights of Man, that was also co-written. Oh, Common Sense, sorry. That was co-written by William Godwin. So, one step removed from the Shelley family.
Snap. I didn't realize that. Great connection. Good call out. Mm-hmm. Now, in November of that year, Lincoln would win the presidential election with just 40% of the popular vote, with many believing he would soon abolish slavery. 2 weeks after that, South Carolina became the first state to secede from the Union, followed by Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. The Confederate States of America was then formed on February 9th, 1861, and Jefferson Davis was named president. Steamboat transportation up and down the Mississippi River was about to get exponentially more complicated and dangerous, and Sam would soon be forced to make a decision. Heed the call of the Confederacy to defend his homeland and uphold the principles of slavery, or get the hell out of Dodge.
I'm guessing it's going to be get the hell out of Dodge.
And that's where we'll pick back up for part 3. of Mark Twain.
Man, he's got to be dipping out of there, right? Because after New York, there's no way that he's going to take up a rifle. Oh man, it remains to be seen.
It remains to be seen. It's fun though. What ends up happening? It's pretty darn fun.
Oh, dude, that one was good. That one's really good. It was also just so brutal hearing about his brother and.
I know, right?
Yeah. But
Very
it's also
sad.
in a lighter note, incredible considering where they came from. I have to give credit to Twain's mom for like making sure that he's like, oh, fine, you're going to go into a trade. It's going to be a trade about reading. And then that ended up helping him, travel across to New York. It helped him coming back and end up getting work as a pilot. And, just having that education sort of, it's funny how you wouldn't think that going to school would have helped him become a captain or a pilot for a steamboat, but it kind of just like skipped and fell its way into there. And yeah.
Well, and it was also, I think it was one of those where becoming a steamboat pilot was, I don't even know what a good comparison would be now. Maybe something like being like, I want to be a firefighter when you're 10, right?
Yeah.
Because there was sort of just a romantic notion to the entire thing. There's a manliness to the entire thing that you see as a little boy or whatever, or maybe as a girl. I don't know. Don't
totally.
know many people. But yeah, I think that was why he wanted to become a steamboat pilot, was that he was like, oh man, the respect, the freedom, the pay, people are going to see me. And if you don't know this, at the very, very top of the ships, the steamships, it was called the pilot house.
Uh-huh.
So it was almost like this beacon at the top of the ship that when they would go passing by, that was who you saw. Up at the very
That's
top,
cool.
holding the wheel, driving it through the Mississippi or whatever. So I think there's just this automatic thing, especially when like the kids growing up in the area, which was like, that is the coolest thing you can do. There is nothing cooler than that, apart from being like, up with Wild Bill or something and in a Wild West show, which nobody can do. But like this I can do, and it is awesome. It's
and the pay is incredible. I didn't realize how well paid he was going to end up being for being a pilot of a steamboat.
Yeah, man.
But like he's like making, like you said, as much as the vice president of the United States, which is also kind of crazy.
Yeah, and what we're going to find as well is and we'll talk more about this in the next episode, but we kind of find with when the Civil War broke out, because trade, I mean, you think about geographically, the Mississippi River literally goes between the north of the U.S. and the south of the U.S.
Yes.
So trade between these two areas basically came to a standstill. So trade was drastically reduced, and then even further, both sides, the Union and the Confederacy, were both like, well, a key part of our war needs to be naval power to some extent. Who's the best people to be driving these ships around? Existing steamboat pilots. So there was this mad dash from both sides to be like, we want to pull in these steamboat pilots anywhere that we can, because we don't have to train you. You already know, and you can get us to strategic points on the Mississippi River without us having to do anything.
That does also add a little notch to Harriet Tubman's cap too. And I think about Harriet Tubman's story because she navigated steamboats like without any experience.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure, and maybe we'll add this to office hours, but I'm pretty sure one of the stories of Harriet Tubman herself is the fact that when she escaped from the South, she commandeered, I believe, a steamboat and managed to navigate it all the way up to the northern states.
Damn.
Which you just mentioned is like almost impossible to do.
There were literal blockades. Like I don't know how she would have done that. So I'd be very curious to read about it.
Let's definitely keep that one for office hours because that seems like an interesting one to go down.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, yeah, this is another one of those key parts of the Mark Twain story of him being this riverboat captain. Again, because so much of his writing in the future centralizes around events along the Mississippi.
Yeah, he
So
almost
this was
sees
that
it as like a
experience.
mythological character, like in some ways.
Yeah.
Where it's like it has like an energy and an aura, and it has to do the central to the plot. Yeah.
100% does, and you also have to think about it from. It's interesting actually to make this comparison between what the riverboat pilots did and actual pilots now do.
Yeah.
And I know a big thing for a lot of airline pilots is it's basically a 24/7 job when you're flying. You can't, one person has to be holding the stick while the other person takes a nap or whatever.
Yep.
But what it gives you is now you actually get to see the sunset and the sunrise constantly coming above these clouds. And that's like half of what they love is like, oh my gosh, you can see these views all over the place. So that was also Mark Twain's experience going up and down the Mississippi, was constantly seeing the changing areas, the trees and the fog and the wildlife and the sunrises and the sunsets, because that boat didn't stop most of the time at night. It kept going.
Yeah.
So somebody had to be there making sure that it was on course or whatever. So, I think it just became this huge, like you kind of said, spiritual thing for him of like, this feels like it's its own living, breathing entity, know? But anyway, pretty cool stuff. Apart from his brother, good Lord.
Getting eviscerated.
Yeah, I mean, and it makes me so sad. It was like his bestest friend, and
yeah, it's also terrible. I actually there's a friend of mine who does lots of like outdoors stuff, slacklining and climbing and hiking and all of this stuff. And we were talking about the concept of like, oh, well, he died doing what he loved. And how a lot of the times people who do sports or go out camping or stuff like that don't like that phrase, because probably also for Mark Twain himself, when you have a friend who, quote, dies doing what he loves, that has now traumatized an entire group of people about a thing that they also love.
Right.
So maybe for a while he was working on these steamboats, it just reminded him of his brother. And that like kind of took some of the mystique out of it for him. I'm curious.
And the thing too to remember is that his brother Henry was not doing what he loved. He was basically a glorified janitor on the boat. So he was doing a lot of like coal shoveling and relaying orders. He was trying to work up into becoming a pilot, but he definitely wasn't like living the dream. He was a low level employee on a steamship.
That changes things a little bit. Yeah.
So like, I don't even think that Mark Twain was able to look at that with his brother and go, oh, well, he died doing something that he loved. It was like, I roped him into this. I said, if you start here, you can become a pilot, and, eventually we can be doing the same thing. These pilot brothers, it'll be great. And his brother was like, sure, that sounds good. And then dies as a result. Yeah. And even more, devastating is that it was like, and this is where the cosmic, of the whole situation, had that pilot Brown not been an asshole, had he not ignored Henry coming up and saying, hey, we're going to dock over here, if he had listened and gone, cool, done, docked at the appropriate place, they never would have gotten into a fight. Yep. And Mark Twain would have been on that boat with his brother when it exploded. And I think that was where a big part of the guilt came in, is that he was like, somehow, by my violent actions, I dodged this bullet, whereas my sweet little brother, who did nothing,
had to deal with the consequences,
stayed on it and died.
Yeah.
That's heavy, dude.
Yeah.
Really, really heavy.
I'm interested to see how this translates into like his later decision making in his life, because it certainly will.
I mean, we're going to see another thing that I actually really love about Mark Twain's life. He is not immune to depression. He is not immune to bad financial decisions, to drinking in excess, to all of these sort of vices.
Very human, yeah.
Yeah. Where like you can feel as his life goes on that there is a lot of like haunted by the ghosts of his past. So anyway,
I feel like him and Tesla, that's why I'm already seeing, and I know that their friendship might have not been as deep as the Tesla biography might have indicated, but I can already see some commonalities between the two. Yeah. Just coming on.
And it's also fascinating because I'm thinking it through now, and I'm like, okay, Ian Fleming, the first series the first male series I did anyways. Ian Fleming's dad dies in World War I when he's like 13, 12, something like that. Jack Daniel, his dad dies when he's about 15. Franz Liszt, His dad dies when he's like 16. It keeps going on.
Tesla's dad dies when he was in university.
Marilyn
Da Vinci's
Monroe,
dad didn't die, but he was estranged by him.
Yeah. Marilyn Monroe
Alexander
never
Dumas
knew her
died.
dad. She was an orphan.
Yeah.
You keep going through this, and it's like this funny recurring theme of like people that lose their parents early on, something changes in their brain.
Mary Shelley.
All of it. It's like it's this weird undercurrent that almost always exists, most of the time anyways, in the subjects that we cover.
Yeah, well,
It's
you
wild.
heard it from us, folks. If you want to become famous, you should just kill your parents.
Oh, God.
Mom, watch out.
He's coming for you.
I'm going to make it.
All right, well, we'll wrap up there. Again, thanks everybody for listening. I hope you're enjoying the series so far. Again, I know I am. And it's
This is
only going to
fantastic.
go, in my opinion, it gets, I don't know about cooler and cooler, but there just keeps being more turns and more twists and more fun stuff. And this guy just never slows down, seemingly, and he's constantly doing interesting new stuff. So, again, thanks everybody for listening. Hopefully we'll see you next time. But like always, a couple of shout outs. First and foremost is if there are any questions, comments, or corrections, you can shoot us an email at thebiographerspodcast@gmail.com. If you feel like supporting the show, you can go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/thebiographers. Throw us a couple bucks if you feel so inclined. You can also leave us a nice review somewhere if you want to. We'd appreciate that too. You can find us on all the social media places, like we've said many times before, places like Instagram and TikTok, and most prominently probably YouTube. You can find more stuff there. I know Akiva, I'm not sure for when this episode airs if it'll still be, probably not availability for Hardy and Fuller, but anything you want to give a shout out to in terms of knives or knife making or anything like that?
Yeah. So, as always, if you use the code biographers, you will get 10% off on any of the knives that I have in stock, as well as custom commissions. When this comes out, it'll be close to October, which means you might not think it, but the holidays are right around the corner. And if you want something custom, you want something nice, I would get ahead on that. As far as classes go, in October, we do have a bunch of classes coming up, most especially this really fun dagger class that I've been doing. Nice. It's based off of the Iron Dagger from Skyrim. In 2 days, we get to do like really brute to forge, super like old school Viking-y kind of work, and a lot of the times we end up with like doing like a little Viking feast at the end of it.
Nice.
Of like meat and roast chicken and, all of that stuff. It's tons of fun, and I don't think there's really a prerequisite for that class, even though it is a 2-day class, because just the forging is, like I said, fairly rudimentary. So if you want to get started on it, go to Hardy and Fuller, check out some of the classes we have there. There should still be some dates available.
And that is specifically in Denver, full of our Colorado listeners.
Yes.
And if you did want to grab anything from Akiva, you'd go to his website. That's going to be metalworkbymiola.com. And again, you can use the code biographers at checkout to get 10% off of your order. We'll wrap it up there, though. Again, thanks everybody so much for listening. And remember, like always, ignorance is not stupidity. It is the absence of knowledge. And I do hope you all learned something today.
See ya.
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.